Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. The 90 days of May is quite a uniquely emotional time for me, a middle school math teacher. Perhaps that is why I'm actually writing about this right now. Who knows? This is about something that happened yesterday that involves the family I tutored for years. Last night was the last night I was going to tutor Lucas. Correction. Last night was the night I was going to swing by at my usual time to collect a gift from the family for tutoring Lucas from 8th grade to now, as a super senior with Asperger's, graduating with pride. I really connected with this family over the years and saw Luck transform from a student reluctant to do any work ever to a student who starts the work before I even show up. I couldn't be prouder. I even brought him a card and a little gift to honor his growth and achievement. When I show up, it's all elbows and handshake. I say elbows because that's what we've been doing since 2020. Like kitchen workers who don't want to pass on meat juice or whatnot. We exchange gifts and they say that they've made dinner for me. Sweet. Dinner was great, and as things started to wrap up, things ramped up as well. Lucas asked to be excused, and as cliche as it sounds, now we were alone. This was a feeling that I was the last to have or understand, but I quickly started to get it. Allard, the grandpa, came up behind me as I was sitting, while Sharon, Grandma, sat across from me with elbows on the table, head cocked and staring at me, smiling. Suddenly, Allard says to me from behind, "We're gonna hate not having you around here anymore," while his thumbs made circular motions on my shoulders as his forefingers caressed my clavicle. I wish I could type on this thing just how eerily obvious he was being based on the inflection of his words. The thumbs and fingers did just fine with that. Normally, I would be clueless to all this and just leave it to cultural differences, but Sharon reached across to grab my hand simultaneously, and it sent lightning through my soul. A whole flood of memories, equally good and horrible. Having been abused at a young age by my father, anyone in this experience will get it. And then horrible, some more caused me to ease back. It took every iota of power to not physically, violently flinch back to this and get up. They weren't getting that I wasn't into whatever they were proposing, so I did a spin move as coolly as I could and walked toward the front door. All of a sudden, Sharon says, "Oh, you can't leave like that, not like that." All are nodded in agreement in the now background. Enter malicious compliance. "I can't leave you like that." "Let me comply with that by leaving in a different way, door." I was panicking hardcore now and didn't want to make things any more awkward and weird as they were for me, so I told them I just wanted to wash my hands first. I went to the bathroom that was conveniently by the door that leads to the garage. I washed up so quick, COVID would not approve, and then gently as possible opened the garage entryway to see if they left the actual garage door open. If it was open, I'm running out and leave. I open a skosh and see my opening. Literally and figuratively. I ran out of that place and haven't looked back since. I found out the grandparents of a kid I've been tutoring for years are swingers in the most awkward way possible. Pre-update. I ended with since when it was 19 hours old. It was very recent. Also, I am 47 and not what people would call, obviously, undeniably, or even noticeably, attractive. I'm not that guy who walks into a room, boom, there goes the panties. When I walk in the record scratches, I'm that guy in the movie. Don't get me wrong, I have my type, or they have me. I'm fairly tall, blue eyes. What I just learned was called a samurai bun, and I'm a pretty big dude, normal for 2020. And like I said, I definitely have my fans. They're usually biker chicks in their mid-50s with zero fucks to give. Well, at least one, I guess. Most of them end up being from Philly for some strange reason. All apologies to Bill Burr, and I'm a Bostonian. But I digress. Maybe I was reading into things, but being S.A. by my dad as a child for years, my body reacted so harshly to this. They were probably just trying to be nice, really nice, and I appreciated the offer if that is what it was. I apologized for leaving like I did and explained the situation. They told me that I wasn't misinterpreting, and they said the offer still stands. They gave me a nice chunk of cash also that I didn't see until after I left. I don't know how that plays into it, but just a detail I'm adding for no reason. Hello, I kind of wish I had my own Karen story to post here. But apart from farting into a vent to get back at a bad housemate, I don't have anything else interesting of my own to share. But I do have one story from a former friend of mine. We aren't friends anymore, since he just got more toxic with time. And it likely stems from his mother, who was a real Princess Peach in her own right. Her husband died when her son was a teenager, and she quickly remarried. My former friend, FF for short, did not like his new stepfather. And it was a mutual hate. As the man had his own kids, he moved into the house. FF turned 18, moved out and into an apartment above his grandparents' garage, and we met when we were both 20. We were co-workers that hit off well. I was new to the area at the time, and he helped me figure the city out. For 5 years, he and I were like brothers. We knew everything about each other. But then he started to get demanding. And one day he punched me for suggesting he get a mental health check. He refused to apologize, and we went our separate ways. I'm 30 now, and haven't heard from him in a long time now. FF's mom was a whole other can of vodka-soaked gummy worms, though. This woman was clearly narcissistic, and FF cried to me about her many times. She showed up at his apartment constantly, and she was always trying to volunteer him to do things. He told me that before he moved out, she would regularly tell friends and relatives that he would come over and do chores for them, and then force him to do it, either for free or his mom would keep the money if he was paid anything. Eventually, FF's grandparents had to open up a checking account for him to deposit any money he earned into, so he'd have something to use when he became an adult. FF's mom lost her mind and demanded access to the account. She claimed before that she'd only been holding on to FF's money for him till he was of age. But they knew she spent it because she never willingly returned a cent. FF's grandparents made her pay back $200, even though it was likely more than that. And she acted like they were robbing her, even though she'd basically been robbing FF for years. Fast forward to when FF and I are best friends. I watched him get in several confrontations with his mother, and after a while he came up with something I thought was genius. He got a generic spray bottle filled with water and kept it in reach by the front door. When his mom would start yelling at him when he talked to her while she stood outside, he'd squirt her in the face and tell her no like a dog when she got belligerent. FF, thanks to help from his grandparents, managed to afford a car. It was just an old minivan, but he treated it like his baby. FF's mom flipped her lid because she felt it unsafe for FF to have a car. She never helped him get his license. His grandparents had to do that. FF's mom never really had a good reason as to why she didn't want him to drive, but she nagged at him about it anyway. FF told me the real reason she was so angry was that FF owning his own car meant that he could go far away and never come back if he wanted to. And she wanted to keep him under her thumb. Then FF's mom went from nagging about how he shouldn't be driving to him needing to share the van with his eldest step-sibling. This kid was 16 or so and had a permit hot off the press. Not a license. A permit. FF understandably didn't trust this kid and told his mom no. His step-brother would not be driving his car. His mom showed up again with the whole Step family in town, and they gave FF a big speech about how he needed to help family. He told them he'd call police if they even touched his van. The next day, he found both sides of his van had been keyed. The paint already sucked. But this didn't help. Fortunately, the apartment complex had CCTV, and it showed FF's stepdad doing the deed. He was given a choice to either repaint the van or FF would press charges. The man repainted the van himself. Wasn't great paint, but it was an improvement. The van went from patchy metallic green to white. The final thing that happened with FF's mom before FF and I stopped being friends was she attempted to force FF to renounce any claim to his grandparents' will. FF's grandparents had become so fed up with their daughter's entitled narcissistic behavior that they said they'd change their joint will to give everything to their grandson. FF was elated by this, but his mother, not so much. She had a meltdown about it, and FF got threats from his stepdad. FF just told them that he'd take all evidence of harassment to police if they didn't leave him alone. And they finally did. They'd stopped talking to FF completely by the time we parted ways. So that's it. The only Karen story I have to tell. So I used to work at this restaurant in the downtown city. Terrible job experience, but it was a job. One day, we get slammed. Usually it's because of a game night since this burger place is right behind a baseball field, but this day was different. First of all, I was already pissed. Coworker who thought he was the manager showed up an hour late, so I had to open the entire front of the restaurant alone within 30 minutes because people were already waiting in the parking lot. Coworker shows up, I don't say a word to him. Oh well, move on with the day. Day goes on, and I come in for my shift. Soccer teams come over after a tournament. I'm talking about 100 players with a line out the door. On shifts like this, some of the kitchen staff had to drop everything and help the other front of house employees, including myself, deliver orders because we're taking orders. Cleaning tables, putting orders together, delivering them, serving drinks. I did this when I was 18 and making milkshakes. Customers were great. All of the players that came in were so nice and we had no issues. No impatience, no complaints, nothing. Just a nice day. They tipped us nicely as well, so we really appreciated that. I should probably mention at this point that we take DoorDash orders, which is where Karen comes in. For those of you who don't know, DoorDashers are people who are paid by a customer to go get food from a restaurant and bring it to them. We get in our usual rush and me and 3 other coworkers are obviously multitasking and rushing to keep everyone happy. The DoorDash tablet goes off. I confirm it and start prepping the order. Mind you, this included a milkshake. I'm not going to go ahead and make the milkshake because God only knows when this woman is going to show up. Rest of the order is ready to go, and she shows up while we're helping other customers. Let me tell you about this woman. By definition, a Karen. She had the typical Karen cut with the eye of a freaking White Walker. I'm talking bright blue eyes, obviously fake because they were Twitter logo blue and almost solid, that peer into your soul in a split second. I swear I saw the gates of hell in her eye. So I'm just going to call her Karen. She starts getting impatient and asks me how much longer it'll be. I apologize and tell her that it won't be much longer, and I go to start the milkshake. She starts flipping out at my coworkers, and as I'm passing her to get the rest of the DoorDash order, she starts laying it on me. Screaming at me because I didn't have the milkshake ready and that I was costing her tips. The woman was wearing Lululemon yoga pants and had expensive color contacts in. She would be fine without $3. Sort of manager comes out to talk to her. Let's call him C. C comes out and explains the situation. She doesn't accept what he's saying and starts screaming in front of 200 people about how she won't get tips and how hard is it to make one milkshake. Karen gives us the typical I want to speak to the manager, and the manager just so happens to be Key. He tells her he is the manager. He asks her to leave, and she continues her rant, calling CIA coward about 5 or 6 times. Karen finally leaves. I'm fuming about this lunatic coming in and making everyone uncomfortable, so I do a little digging. Turns out, if you go onto the tablet, you can find the previous DoorDashers who come into the restaurant to get orders. I remember the name of the customer who ordered, so I go onto the tablet to find the DoorDasher's name. I find her name and cell phone number on the order history and information. I get into contact with the DoorDash company and explain the harassment we endured from Karen and give them her name and contact number, saying she was from unredacted city. They tell me they'll look into it. They contacted me later and informed me that it was taken care of and we never saw her again, as she regularly took orders from us. We all went on our merry way and occasionally called each other cowards as our own little inside joke. So let me tell you about a bizarre incident that happened a couple of days ago. I'm out there just doing my usual gig as a patrol officer, cruising the streets, keeping an eye on things. You know the drill. I've got my coffee in the cup holder, probably a donut in there too, your type of cliche, and life's moving at a steady pace. Nothing too crazy until I spot this scene that makes my eyebrow do the Macarena. I'm at this intersection, waiting for the light to change when suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I catch this car just zooming through the red light. Like, no hesitation, no brake, check, just a full-on, I've got places to be, screw the traffic rules kind of vibe. Now I'm all about chill vibes, but breaking the law like that. Nah, we can't have that. So I flip on my lights, the whole shebang, red and blue disco time, and kick the gas pedal, giving chase to this speeding bullet. Okay, maybe not a bullet, but you get the drift. It's like a movie moment, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and I'm thinking, this is it. This is the kind of excitement I signed up for. A few blocks of intense pursuit later, I managed to wrangle the speed demon over to the side of the road. And who steps out of the car? None other than Karen herself, a name that's become synonymous with. Let me talk to your manager. Now, I'm not one to judge a book by its cover, but let's just say her haircut wasn't doing any favors for the stereotype, just like my donuts. Karen was speaking on the phone. I approached her and said, "Ma'am, do you have any idea why I pulled you over?" I asked, trying to keep it cool. She rolls her eyes. I swear I could almost hear them, and goes, "Look, officer, I was kinda in a rush, okay? I've got this yoga class, and being Zen is serious business." I gotta admit, I wasn't prepared for that one. Yoga, seriously? But hey, we're all entitled to our reasons, right? Running a red light isn't exactly a yogi move, Mom. I quip back, trying to keep the sarcasm in check. Please hang up and get out of the car. Karen gets out and is still holding the phone to her ear. I said to her with a firm voice, "Please, ma'am, hang up the phone." And here comes the plot twist. Karen shoves me. Yeah, you read that right. Shoves. Me. Now, I'm no rookie and I've dealt with my fair share of wild situations, but this was a new level of audacity. It's like she thought pushing an officer of the law was just as casual as adding an extra shot of espresso to her latte. All right, that's enough, I say, trying to channel my inner Zen master as I snap the cuffs on her. You're under arrest. Fast forward to the station and Corinne's hubby rolls in like a knight in shining armor. Okay, maybe not shining armor, more like wrinkled khaki in a polo shirt, but you get the idea. He's all, "What happened, officer?" "Why is my wife here?" I explain the whole red light debacle, the shove, the works. And this dude, let's call him Steve, he gives me this look like he's trying to blend sympathy and embarrassment. "Man, officer, I'm sorry about all this. You know how Karen gets when her chakras are out of whack?" Chakras? Yep, he went there? I couldn't help but chuckle. Well, Steve, maybe tell Karen that assaulting an officer isn't the way to realign those chakras. A bit of back and forth, some paperwork, and Kern's bailed out. Crazy thing working on the street and have to deal with those kind of entitled people. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. Just felt like writing this up for everybody to enjoy. This happened to my best friend, M, somewhere early 30s at that point. About 10 years ago, we'll call him Mark. It happened in Germany. Mark lived in a small apartment building, somewhat on the very edge of a large town, but this area was more like a small town or village. Many families, basically no one passing through. The apartment building held 6 apartments with Mark living in one, his sister in another, his mother in another, and 3 apartments rented by other people. Also, Mark had been raised in this building, and at that point he had been living there his whole life. Mark loved to, and still does, ride a racing bike. He is an avid cyclist in general, doing much of his early life on a bike for which he has the everyday sort of bike with a basket, etc. Yet, he also has owned several very expensive, sometimes custom-made racing bikes over the years on which he spent much of his weekends. Enter a neighbor who had been living there a while, M, around 40. We will call him Dave. Dave had a second-hand bike, a sturdy one but missing some care. At one point, Dave decided that he actually did not need that bike anymore. But there were 2 boys living some houses away, 8, 12, or around that, who had to share one bicycle. So Dave went out to them and told them that he had a bike left, which he had not been using for quite a while. He told them it might be a bit dusty and the tires might be flat. That's what he explained later, and that they can have it. No strings attached, except for that they had to get it from his cellar, and of course tell their parents about this, so there would not be any trouble. He went with them back to the house then, unlocked the door, showed them where to get into the cellar, then left for work. Some hours later, my friend Mark comes home from work and sees 2 boys he knows from his neighborhood on bikes, one of which is clearly his rather expensive, say $2,500 racing bike. He stops them in the road and demands they hand over his bike. They don't want to, claiming it's theirs and that it was a present from neighbor, Dave. Mark tells them that it certainly was not, because this bike belongs to him, not Dave. Hence, Dave can't have gifted it to them. They call him a liar and want to take off with the bike, but Mark holds firm to the handlebar and tells them he will call the police if they do not hand over the bike this very instant. The boys get scared and run away with their own bike. Mark takes his bike back to his apartment, checks it, and finds that the boys obviously used it like it was a mountain bike, so he knew he had to repair some things and it would probably be costly. He hears Dave coming home. They lived on the same floor, leaves his apartment and tells Dave about what happened. Dave is very embarrassed and apologetic and assures Mark that he specifically told the boys that his bike was an older model, dusty, and probably with flat tires, and that he has absolutely no idea they could mistake his bike for a brand new, gleaming racing bike. The thing that most likely happened was the boys entered the cellar after Dave had let them. The bicycles were all in a room down there, but this is an old building. There was nothing to lock them to, and after living in that place for so many years and never having a single issue of any foul play, Mark had never thought about locking his bikes together or putting a lock around the wheel and frame or something. Down there, however, the boys were in the midst of some bikes, many of which might have been too tall or looked like a woman's or just didn't meet their taste. Ignoring Dave's explanation of how the bike they were gifted would look, the boys decided to take the only bike from down there. That was definitely very new and flashing, and that was definitely by far the best horse in the stable. One could have ended the tale here if entitled, "Kid were not often met by entitled parent," because on the same evening, the boy's dad showed up, demanding that Mark hand over the bicycle his boys had been gifted. Mark tried to explain what most likely had happened, phrasing it that the boys mistook the bicycles, but Dad did not listen. Once they were down in the cellar, accompanied by Dave, who did his best to explain too, Mark and Dave pointed out the gifted bike, only for Dad to say, "No, that is not it." "Where is the racing bike?" They explained again. Dad still demanded the racing bike. They explained again. Dad said that he did not buy their story. His sons had been given a racing bike, and they would get it the very moment, or Dad would call the police. That's when both Mark and Dave started laughing and kicked him out, but not without the information that Mark's bike was not only registered with the police and the manufacturer as his, not Dave's, but also insured under his name. Hence, Dave could not have gifted the bike to the boys. But that they would look forward to Dad calling the police because that would end with Mark reporting his boys for theft and for damaging his bike and their father for coercion. Dad left in a hurry. After fixing the damages on his bike, Mark put an envelope into the family's mailbox, detailing the costs. If I recall correctly, it was around 300 €, and writing that children make mistakes and that he will not demand the money back. But to let this be a warning to Dad to think about his behavior. The following years in which the family lived down the road, the boys and father would make sure to avoid Mark, and if they could not, they greeted him very nicely, but never looked him in the eye. I was in middle school in the 90s. I loved growing up then, and even though there were gangs in my area, I generally avoided trouble. One of my classes had this big field trip planned, and they had us selling chocolates to raise money for our trip. I was pretty good at it and was selling at a good rate. I would take the bus, public transportation, to school, and my stop was about 2 blocks from my home. I got off at my stop one day with my box of chocolates, and there was this older kid, around 16, 17, pretty big for his age, hanging out there. He saw me and came towards me. This guy is clearly a gangbanger. PSO comes up to me and says, "Hey homie, where you from?" He was asking what gang I was from. It's not the first time I get challenged like this, so I just reply, "I don't bang, man. I'm just a junior high kid." Payaso looks at my box of chocolates and takes it from me. "What's this?" I tell him it's nothing. It's something for school. He opens the box and sees a bunch of dollars in there. He grabs the bills, around $15, my sales for the day, and takes a bunch of chocolates as well. "Tomorrow you're going to give me $20 more. If you don't, we're going to have a real effing problem." I walk away feeling scared and pissed off. I realize I'm going to have to pay back the lost money from my birthday money. And I definitely didn't want to give this guy any more money. I think about it and decide I'll get off at a later bus stop from now on and walk a little more just to avoid this guy. The next day, this is what I do. I stuff my box in my backpack just in case, and I exit about 2 stops later. I don't see the guy and think I have solved my problem. Then I get to the liquor store a block away from home, and who do I see but this overgrown idiot payaso? Hey man, you didn't forget about me, did you? I said, look man, I don't have any money right now. I don't even have my chocolates. I left them at home. I shouldn't have said that. Okay, let's go to your house and you're going to give me the money or something else if you don't got it. I begin getting real nervous. My mom is at work and my grandma is home. I definitely don't want to bring him home with her there. I glance at him and notice the tattoos on his arms. At this point, I saw the perfect opportunity for malicious compliance. I tell him, I don't think that's a good idea. Why don't you just let me go, man? Payaso grabs me by the collar and says, I tell you what to do and you do it. You understand? I nod my head and tell him to follow me. Now it's time to give a little background. My neighbor that lived in the house next to mine was a veterano, a veteran of one of the biggest, most notorious gangs in the city. He was in his 40s and a real chill dude. He loved my grandma because she would often share plates of food she made with him and his wife, and he was fond of me because I taught his 8-year-old boy how to play baseball. His son had a disability, a problem with one of his legs, so most other kids wouldn't play with him, but I often did. Let's call my neighbor OG. OG always had a bunch of guys over at his house. He made sure they never caused problems and they were all respectful towards my family in particular. Back to Payaso. The tattoos on his arm. I realized he was from the same gang as OG. I have a big smile as I'm walking home and Payaso asks me, why are you smiling, pendejo idiot? I say no reason and keep walking home. As we get closer, I see a bunch of guys hanging out at OG's house. Payaso narrows his eyes and smiles as he recognizes some of the guys. We get to OG's house and Payaso says, wait here, pendejo. Let me talk to my homies. OG is sitting on his porch and Payaso starts greeting some of the guys and then heads towards OG and greets him in a reverential manner. OG notices me and says my name, hey OP. What's up? Payaso turns to look at me and I say, Payaso told me to wait here. I have to go home and give him money. OG stands up and said, why do you have to give him money? I say because he told me yesterday at my bus stop that the $15 in chocolates he took from me wasn't enough and I had to give him more today. Payaso begins to speak. You know this kid OG. OG gives him the scariest look I've ever seen and tells him to shut the F up. OG looks back at me and asks, is this from the chocolates you're selling? I said yes. OG asks me how many chocolates I have left to sell. I say 50. He tells me not to worry. Payaso is going to pay me for the 50 I have left, plus 20 for the day before, and an extra 50 for my trouble. He tells me to keep whatever else I sell. He tells me to go home and Payaso would be back later with my money. About an hour later, there's a knock on my door and Payaso has an envelope and says, here's $120, little homie. I screwed up. I'm sorry. Do you have a Nintendo? I brought you some games. I just stood there stunned and thinking how I never would have guessed that getting robbed had so many benefits. I didn't see Payaso too many times after that, but whenever I did, he would wave at me and never bothered me again. Years ago, shortly after I'd left the service, my girlfriend, now wife, and I moved in together, halfway across the U.S. from both of our respective families, long stories for another time, and to a place where we both had friends as a result of our military travels. One of my wife's friends, we'll call her Anna, had gotten married in the intervening years since they had last been together, and was in the process of a divorce since her husband had knocked up the checkout girl at the local orchard. She had left the home, a single-wide trailer, important later, they owned, left the car they owned, which she had solely paid for and was still in her name. Moved back in with her parents and got a second job. She already worked at a large big-box retail establishment. Of course, my wife and I commiserate with her on multiple occasions about how poorly she had been treated. Anna made a remark at one point about missing her bills that month. My wife asked what bills. You live with your parents, you have 2 jobs, no credit cards, and you never do anything expensive. What could you possibly owe anyone money for? It turns out that she still had a checking account linked to her ex-husband's account, and when he decided not to pay the mortgage or the car payment, they simply took it out of her account, marked the loan current, and went on with their lives. Shortly after the divorce, he would make most payments, but for the last year or so, he hasn't made a single one. So ex-hubby has perfect credit because he never misses a payment, and Anna's credit is in the toilet because she is constantly late on her own bills. Anna may have 2 jobs and not a lot of bills, cell phone, car payment, insurance. When she's making someone else's mortgage and car payments as well, she's pretty much broke. And that why she never does anything expensive and has to have me change her oil in my gravel driveway because she can't afford $20 for Jiffy Lube. I asked her why she didn't close the accounts and go somewhere else. Anna's answer, but if they miss their payments, the bank will take their house and their car and they have a baby. I can't do that to them. I did the Forrest Whitaker eye. Then I said they're taking advantage of you pretty badly. They've established that you'll pay all their bills for them, and they can do whatever the hell they want because you'll never force the sale of the house or the car. If I had an option to pay my bills or pass it off to someone I don't like, I'd let them do it every time. He's paying an electric bill and getting a free house, car, and everything else. And I guarantee that he's handing these bills to the social worker and claiming he can't afford to live, so they'll give him WIC, food stamps, and everything else. You're funding the lifestyle of a jerk who cheated on you and a woman who knew he was married because every time she came over, she made him take your wedding pictures down so she didn't have to look at you while she got intimate with your husband. You're paying bills for a guy who is so dumb that he thought he couldn't get a woman pregnant he wasn't married to, and a woman who thought that because she was cheating, she wouldn't get pregnant. Those witches. You see, I may not give a rip about most of my family, but you do not mess with my friends. She gives it some thought, and a couple of days later asks for some help out of this. I took her to my bank to get an account the next day. She moves her direct deposit, withdraws her money, and closes her old account. Next month, ex-hubby's bills don't get paid. We're watching a movie when he calls. She spends an hour in a screaming match with him telling him to pay his own bills. She's been charitable enough, and he and his new wife can pay for their own stuff. Then the penny drops. Remember earlier when I said the house was a trailer? Anna has been paying the mortgage on the trailer, but not the rent for the lot it's on. They never had her checking account. This entitled prick has been assuming she's been paying that too. She assumed he hasn't even figured out what's coming yet. He's calling because he's pissed off she hasn't paid the lot rent in forever, and he's being told to pay up, move his trailer, or they'll do it and hold the trailer in arrears until the bill for moving it is paid. He's calling to ask her for another $6,000, or they'll lose the home they both love so much. Now, up until this moment, Anna had been this sweet, wonderful gumdrop of a person. The type of person that it should be legal to slap if they're encountered before Ninium. The relentlessly sunny person that you send into the room to cheer up Tinkerbell. For the better part of a year, I haven't heard this woman say a bad thing about anybody. Until tonight. Until this guy called to complain that she hadn't been paying enough of his bills. And she loses her mind. She lights into this guy that he'd better figure it out because he's not getting another penny from her ever again. And while he's figuring out who to beg, borrow, or steal that money from, he may want to get a little extra since he's about to get the overdue notices for the house and the car too. He starts screaming so loud I can clearly hear what he's calling her from across the room before she calmly hits the end button, flips the phone over, pops the battery out, sets them both down on my table. It plays on the VCR, morphs back into her normally sunny self, and offers to make popcorn. Monday morning, she went to the lawyer, filed a no-contact order, filed for bankruptcy. Her credit was already a mess. There were bills her name was on, and she didn't want that splatter all over her. And called the dealer that owned her car note, told her she couldn't make the payments anymore, and offers them a voluntary repossession, has them bring out their tow truck and meets the driver with the keys and the paperwork. Signs them forms? Asked the driver. Oh, so sweetly to drop her off at her parents' house on the way back to the dealer, and waves at her ex from the passenger seat of the tow truck as he comes running out of the trailer, wearing only a towel. Over the course of the next month or two, he lost his job because he couldn't get to work anymore. His wife had to go back to weighing pears at the orchard. Turns out she'd left her job when Anna was paying for everything. And sell his record collection, which was what he'd been spending his money on while someone else was paying for everything. On the bright side, I picked up original vinyl copies of Abbey Road and Yellow Submarine for a total of $5, because his idiot wife running their yard sale didn't understand why the old, crappy records were worth anything anyway. And that's how Tinkerbell burned some entitled jerk's life to the ground. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.